Good to have you here today. Everybody is well rested. We had that extra hour of sleep. It's good to see a lot more people on time today. That's fantastic. Hey, before I preach, we want to celebrate something significant. I was told this morning that Delmer and Claire Crozier had their 65th anniversary, and we want to congratulate you guys. They're just over here. Why don't you stand just for a second? Absolutely incredible. God's faithfulness has been upon both of you. And I got to tell you, I was doing the math this morning, and when I look at you, it doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know if back in the day they used to marry people at 12 or 10. Claire says 10. But congratulations. We sure commend marriages that last long, and it's Jesus at the center of those things. So good. Well, friends, I found myself in the ring of conflict a number of years ago. I was inside of a classroom at Fellows High School. It was our outreach program, and we had a classroom full of unsaved students. Our goal was to create conversations in which these unsaved students could share their opinions about various topics, and our own students from our youth ministry were prepped so that they would speak Christian values, kingdom values into the conversation. As the facilitator of the discussion, I would try not to say anything, give my own personal opinions. I might ask questions that would provoke some thought, but I wouldn't say anything till the very, very end. And I can't remember what the topic of conversation was this one day. But this student in my class, in this classroom, who was doing his co-op with me, he raised his hand at this one point and he asked the most obscure question. He said, "Hey, Jeff, before you got married, did you and Ainsley have premarital sex?" Now you got to imagine, some of you are like, I can't believe he even said the three-letter word in church. But this was in front of all these unsaved students. He says, "Did you have premarital sex?" I said, No, we did not. I was a little tense because I couldn't believe he was asking this question in front of everybody else. And so unashamedly, I said, no, we didn't. And then he said, "Oh, I'm so sure. You're telling me that you dated for those years and you never had premarital sex?" Well, my blood started to rise, started to bubble. I started to get upset. And I said, "No, we did not." And so I tried to move on. I tried to sway the conversation in another direction. Then he pushed it a little bit further. He said, "Are you telling me?" I said, "I'm telling you, we did not have premarital sex." He didn't say anything for a few moments. I thought we had passed the awkward moment. And then he starts to turn to the people around him, unsaved people who needed to know Jesus, and said, "Oh, I'm so sure. I'm sure that he did." And he began to throw me under the bus. I'll tell you, in that moment, something snapped inside of me. I didn't mean to be in the ring of conflict. I didn't want to be there. But I snapped and I said, I called him by name and I said, "I want you to shut your mouth right now." I said, "I don't want to hear another word out of you. That is enough." And everybody in the class just went completely quiet. It was one of the most awkward moments I ever had in high school ministry. And he stayed quiet for the rest of the morning. My blood was still boiling until the session was done. And he happened to be driving to the school with me that day and going back to the church. And so as we got into the car, my blood was boiling. I was facing two different emotions. The first emotion was incredible anger. Here was my student. Here was a kid from my youth group who was a kid who was doing his co-op with me. And he was saying these nasty things about me in front of everybody else. He was questioning my integrity. He was calling me a liar. And he was suggesting that I had been involved with inappropriate actions. I was incredibly angry. But at the same time, there was a second emotion, an emotion of shame. Because I didn't want to be in the ring of conflict in front of all these unsaved kids. I actually felt ashamed for snapping. I felt ashamed for engaging in conflict. Because after all, aren't we supposed to be the peacemakers? Aren't Christians supposed to be nice and calm and Canadian? Like that's what we tend to believe, that we shouldn't confront things, that we should stay as far away from the ring as possible, and I should have just stood there and avoided the ring and just let him say things about me. We sometimes wonder what we're supposed to do when it comes to the ring of conflict. There are some people who love to get in the ring. They're fighters. They love speaking truth. After all, Jesus says that he was the way, the truth, and the life. And so they proclaim the truth part. They're individuals who love they love to proclaim truth. They love to get in the ring. They're fighters. As soon as something untruthful happens, as soon as something wrong happens, they jump in the ring and they begin to duke it out with somebody else. They want to fight and make sure that truth is proclaimed. Then there's some of us who are lovers. Anybody in here a lover? There's one at the back. All right. Some of us are lovers, and we want to capitalize on grace. We want to proclaim grace, and they didn't understand. That he was just being silly in the classroom. Nobody was listening to him. Just treat him sweetly. Just let's proclaim grace, and let's just all have a big group hug and sing Kumbaya. Lovers, fighters, what do we choose? I don't know about you, but there are times I don't know what to do when it comes to the ring of conflict. I don't ever want to get into the ring of conflict. And there's times I'm not sure what to do because I'm not really sure what the Christian response is to conflict. And when I think about that question, what's the Christian response to conflict, I realize that the best way to understand the Christian response to conflict is to look at Jesus Christ. Because if you study the life of Jesus, you will find that throughout Jesus' birth to death, that there is constant conflict. There are these constant moments where there is conflict around Jesus. There is conflict with Jesus. There is conflict about Jesus. It seems that Jesus is surrounded by conflict, and he finds himself in the ring of conflict many times. And so this morning I want to look at Jesus in the ring of conflict, and I want to ask you 4 questions this morning when it comes to approaching the ring of conflict. The first question is this. When it comes to whether or not you should get into the ring of conflict, you need to ask yourself, is this my fight? Is this my fight? Look at this, Matthew chapter 21, verse 12 to 13. Look up on the screen. It says, Jesus entered the temple and he began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, the scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. Jesus the lover. Coming into church, knocking over tables, causing quite a scene. Jesus has come over to the temple. It's supposed to be the house of prayer. It's supposed to be a place where people go after God, where they go get into right relationship with God. And there was a system that had been set up in the temple to help people out. You see, the selling of doves and the exchanging of money had a pure motive when it began. The people who ran the temple, they knew that people traveling to Jerusalem couldn't bring the livestock that they would need for their sacrifices. So they decided that they would create a system where they could sell animals right there and provide the animals for the sacrifice for each festival. So they set up all these tables with all these animals. And then there was this temple tax. And the temple tax could only be paid in Hebrew coin. And most people of that day had Roman coin. And so they needed to set up money-changing tables so that the people who came to pay the money tax, anybody who was 20 years of age or older, that they could take their Roman coin and exchange it for Hebrew coin and pay the temple tax according to Exodus. And so they actually start off with altruistic reasons for doing this. But over time, these pure motives had kind of lost themselves. They had kind of been in the shadows of something even greater. They began to realize that they had quite the business going on. And now the priority of the temple was business. I want you to understand this. It wasn't that Jesus was upset that they were providing a service. He was concerned, he was upset, he was bothered because the priority of the temple was no longer a place of prayer, it was now a place of business. And Jesus comes in and he sees that everybody is all concerned about money. They're all concerned about selling animals, but nobody seems to be concerned about prayers. And he begins to flip the tables and he causes this incredible commotion. He enters the ring for one reason. This is his fight. This is his fight. You see, this is his Father's house. They're treating his Father's house with contempt. They are treating the place of prayer, the place that's meant for his Father, they're treating it poorly. He takes ownership of this because this is his Father's house. If it was somebody else's house, he wouldn't have said anything. He would have avoided the ring. If it was a fishing business and that he didn't like the way it was being run, he thought it could have been run differently, he would have avoided the ring. If it was your house and he thought that there were some things that should have been corrected, he may have said something, but he would probably have avoided the ring. But Jesus enters into the ring of conflict because this is his fight. This is his fight. Any other time, he would have avoided it. Friends, I want to tell you something. When it comes to entering the ring of conflict, you've got to ask the question, is this your fight? Is this your fight? Is this something directed towards you? A number of years ago, there was a man by the name of Ron, and his ministry had been going very, very well. Towards a certain season in his life, things began to get difficult in his ministry. And a friend of his, who was also in ministry, a pastor friend, made a decision one day that was very pure in heart, had no negative motives behind it. But this decision that this pastor friend would make would cause Ron's leadership to be in question. Ron got quite upset when this pastor made the decision. And they had been friends, and they had no conflict between them. Everything was fine. They got along very, very well. But the moment that this pastor friend made the decision, he got into the ring of conflict with this pastor. He stood there. And he would throw punches, and he would say things verbally about this other pastor. He would throw emotional punches whenever he saw this pastor. This was his fight. Now, Ron's best friend, Doug, was quite upset by what he was seeing in Ron's life, the brokenness and the hurt that he was facing. And for a while, Doug was standing on the outside of the ring, and he was trying to encourage his friend Ron, and he would say, hey, you just keep going. Don't worry about that pastor. Don't worry about what he's done. Don't worry about the statements that people are making now. Don't worry. Tried to encourage him. But it got to a place where Doug decided that he needed to step into the ring and that he was going to take this battle on too. And he got into the ring, and he joined Ron, and he began to throw punches at this pastor. Began to throw emotional punches, verbal punches, began to malign this guy's name. This happened for quite a season. What was interesting as I watched the season was that Ron's conflict, his punches got weaker and weaker. He didn't have this bitterness in his heart. It seemed to subside, but Doug, who wasn't even in the ring for his own reasons, was there only because of Ron. Doug seemed to be throwing even harder punches. After a short season of this happening, I actually began to build a friendship with this pastor. I got to know this pastor, and I began to hear his side of the story, began to listen to what had taken place, and began to gained an incredible respect for this pastor. Something interesting happened. I wasn't anywhere near the conflict. I wasn't anywhere near the ring. The fight was between Ron and this pastor. But Doug got into the ring and took on the fight that wasn't his. And then when he found out that I liked this pastor and I was friends with this pastor, he dragged me into the ring. And now there was this fight between Doug and I. And I started to get verbal punches and emotional punches. I found myself in a ring in the middle of this conflict that had nothing to do with me. What's so interesting is that this pastor was able to leave the ring at one point, and Ron, the original person who had entered the ring, left the ring at one point, and now it was just Doug and I, and we're in this conflict that wasn't even ours. And we had this severed relationship because an individual got into the ring and took on the offense for somebody else. Friends, I want to tell you that it is so dangerous to enter a ring and fight a fight that's not yours. I want to tell you that when you get in the ring for somebody else and the fight's not yours, you are going to cause a ripple effect of damage. And as you begin to have conversations with people, and we'll talk a little bit about that next week, but as you begin to hear about people's hurts and their pains and the things that may go on between them and somebody else, about their conflict in the ring, you have got to ask yourself, is it my right to step into this ring? Is it my right to get into this conflict? Because if you get into a conflict that's not yours, I guarantee you that you will cause more damage than the first original couple. You will bring conflict to other people. You will harbor things in your heart, and your offense will go longer than the original offense. And I found myself in a ring, in a battle that wasn't even mine to begin with. Jesus only stepped into the ring because this was his fight. In fact, if you look over in Mark chapter 12, verses 13 to 17, I think we have this on the screen, it says this. It says, later the leaders sent some Pharisees and supporters of Herod to trap Jesus into saying something for which he could be arrested. Teacher, they said, we know how honest you are. You are impartial and don't play favorites. You teach the way of God truthfully. Now tell us, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or shouldn't we?" Jesus saw through their hypocrisy and said, "Why are you trying to trap me? Show me a Roman coin, and I'll tell you." When they handed it to him, he asked, "Whose picture and title are stamped on it?" "Caesar's," they replied. "Well then," Jesus said, "give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God." The Pharisees and the Herodians are in the ring of conflict. As of AD 6, there was this tax that went to Caesar's treasury. And the Pharisees were quite upset about it. They were the religious rulers of the Jewish community. They were quite upset about this, and they felt that they should not pay taxes to Caesar. But there were these Herodians, these Jewish individuals who believed that they should support the Roman government, that they should pay to Herod what belonged to him, that they should pay this tax. And so this conflict rose between the two groups, between the Pharisees and between the Herodians. And they're both in the ring, and Jesus is walking along this walking along, and they say, "Hey, Jesus, why don't you come in the ring with us? Why don't you come into the ring with us? Let's ask you, we want to ask you a question. Can you tell us whether or not we should pay this tax to Caesar's treasury? Can you tell us?" And if Jesus had said, no, we shouldn't pay that, then he would have been on the side of the Pharisees, and he would have found himself in the ring fighting with the Herodians. And if Jesus had said, yeah, we should absolutely pay that, then he would have found himself in the ring with the Herodians against the Pharisees. And Jesus, with incredible wisdom, figures out a way to avoid the ring. He figures out a way to speak truth without giving himself to one of two parties. He avoids the ring because, friends, it's not his fight. Please listen to me. Don't fight things that are not your fight. Don't get into the ring and fight somebody else's battle. Don't stand in places and join sides with people and create division. You only step into the ring when it's your fight. Because I want to tell you something. Every single day somebody will offend you. Every single day there will be problems. There will always be an opportunity to get into the ring. And for some of us, we'll spend our whole lives fighting. Only get into the ring when it's your fight. That's the first question. Is this my fight? The second question is this. Is this worth the fight? Is this worth the fight? Look at Matthew chapter 27, verses 12 to 14. Matthew 27, 12 to 14. It's going to be on the screen. Jesus entered the temple and he began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. Sorry, that's not the right one. Thank you. Voice from heaven. Matthew 27. Matthew 27, 12. Here it is. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. There's a group of people who are standing in the ring, and they're throwing punches at Jesus. They're throwing punches at him. "You did this. You made this comment. You said this. You did this, you did this." And they're making up stories. They're twisting truth. They are speaking lies. They are throwing all kinds of punches. And it would have been very easy for Jesus to hear the things that they're saying and come into the ring and throw punches of defense, put up his fist to block the punches and say, "No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't do that. No, you're wrong. That's a lie." He could have easily entered the ring. The Bible tells us that Jesus stays quiet. He keeps completely calm. Now, why did he do that? Why didn't he defend himself? I mean, I don't know about you, but when injustice takes place, I get upset inside. I want to proclaim something true. Yet Jesus just stands there and avoids the ring. And there may have been many reasons. It may have been because he wanted the prophecy to be fulfilled. It may have been because he knew that he had to go to the cross and that there was no avoiding this, and if he spoke up, it wouldn't have done anything. But thirdly, he probably avoided the ring because he knew that they weren't going to listen. He knew that they had already hardened their hearts. He knew that they were so far gone in their decision about who he was and what his mission was that they were probably not going to listen anyways. And so he could spend all his energies trying to defend himself, get into the ring, But he had to ask himself, is this worth me fighting over? Friends, I want to tell you that sometimes in our conflicts, we're fighting about things that just don't matter. They may matter to us, but if we fight it, the other person may not be receptive to it. They may be so hard in their heart that we are fighting something, we are engaged in conflict, expending all our energies for things that will never move things down the field anyways. And yet I'm just going to tell them the way it is because they need to know. And yet their heart is so hard that they're not going to respond to you anyways. We have to ask ourselves, is this worth us fighting over? Is it worth us expending all our energies over? Is this worth us giving our all? I remember this one time when I was youth pastoring, I was missing drum pieces from our youth room. I couldn't figure it out. And I knew one of our staff members had a son who was a drummer, and so I simply went to the staff member and I said, hey, is it possible that your son has brought some of these pieces home, and like we're missing some stuff? And I was trying my best to do this in a proper way. And what ended up happening was, as I asked this question, this pastor took offense to what I was saying. He felt that I was accusing his son of something, and he began to unload on me. Punch in the face, punch in the face, punch in the face. I mean, I was trying to duck, but I was getting hit by the things he was saying. He began to accuse me of not caring for the kids. He began to accuse me of things, and how dare I say this about his kid? And I took hit after hit after hit. But a week later, I was so convinced that this kid was taking some of our stuff. A week later, I asked this pastor if he would just kind of come with me through to the church. I said, look, I need to figure out what stuff is ours and what stuff belongs to the church. And as we got to the main drum set, there was this one kick, this kick pedal. And this pastor picked it up and he looked and he said, oh my goodness. I said, what? He said, I recognize this pedal. He said, because my son, when his pedal broke, instead of replacing it, I took an old belt and I made the strap with an old belt, and this is my belt. And he said, and you could see his anger began to rise. And he went home that lunch, and I knew he was upset, and he came back that afternoon. And he walked into my office, and he was broken. And he said to me, he said, Jeff, I just got to tell you, I found this, and he showed me all these pieces. I found this and this and this in my son's room. I'm sorry that he's done this. I want to tell you something. In that moment, I wanted to get into the ring with him. I wanted to, it was time, right? Like truth. You just punched me really hard a week ago. You told me what kind of youth pastor I was. You told me I had no right to say things. You laid off some good punches at me. You told me things. Now it's the time of truth. Now I'm going to confront you. I want to get your skinny body into this ring. And I want you to apologize for what you said to me. I want you to know that you were rude and you were obnoxious. And I want to just lay it, I want to punch him with my verbal assaults. But as I stood outside the ring, I had to ask myself the question, is this worth the fight? Is this worth the fight? Is this worth it? See, he was so broken, he didn't need me to assault him anymore. And there are moments in your life where somebody has done something to you, and you probably have a right to throw them into the ring and have the fight. But you got to ask yourself, is that going to help things out? Is this worth the fight? Is this worth the fight? You see, I realize that when somebody is not open, when somebody is hurt, when their heart is hard, that they probably will not receive well when we throw them into the ring. One Christmas, it was New Year's Eve. One New Year's Eve, we were at a family gathering at my grandma's house. I was just a little kid, I was under the age of 10 for sure. And my grandmother had given each of us a bag of chocolates. You know, those little chocolate Easter balls and with the fancy tin foil on it and all those little snowmen and little Santa Clauses and that. And so I had put mine aside. I was pretty good at preserving for the long haul, and so I hadn't touched any after supper. But an hour or two had gone by, and I felt like a chocolate, and so I went to the room where our chocolates were, where my mom had put the chocolates. And I looked at my bag, and a couple of chocolates were missing. The bag was open. And so I was, you're a little kid, and you don't have common sense, and so you just, Mom, chocolates are missing. Call 911. I want to deal with this. And so I went to my mom. I said, Mom, I don't understand. The chocolates are missing. Can you ask your sister, my aunt, can you ask her if maybe one of her kids took the wrong bag. I wasn't accusing them. I just wanted to know maybe they took the wrong bag. So my mom went to her sister and said, hey, Jeff's missing some chocolates, hasn't opened his bag of chocolates, and he's just wondering whether or not one of your kids have taken the wrong bag. Well, all of a sudden, she got her back up. My kids wouldn't do that. Well, can you just maybe ask them, are you accusing me? Are you accusing my kids of taking your son's chocolates? Escalation of conflict. The boxing gloves are out and they're lined with bricks. I mean, it was getting intense. And they began to argue back and forth about these chocolates. And my aunt went and asked my cousins, and they said that they hadn't. And I said, Mom, I don't understand. I'm missing chocolates. And things got more and more escalated. Then they began to yell at one another. Then they began to cry. And then, it was screaming. I'm standing there as a little boy going, I don't need chocolates. And they began to yell and scream. And all of a sudden, this little moment of me missing just one or two chocolate balls turned into this big explosion. And the next thing I knew, my aunt was packing up her kids. She's yelling at my mom. She's rushing down the stairs. And family gathering is over. All because of some chocolates. Most of you understand this because it takes so little to snap people in the middle of family functions. How many can say amen to that? Had I known, I was just a kid, but had I been an adult in that situation, before I ever got into the conflict, after the question was asked and the negative response was made, I would have jumped out of the ring as quickly as possible because it wasn't worth the fight. It wasn't worth wrecking Christmas or New Year's Eve. It wasn't worth wrecking the family moment for the sake of chocolates. Oh, sure. I missed 2 chocolates. Oh, sure, maybe somebody had less, somebody had to sacrifice. But friends, sometimes in life it's worth making the sacrifices. Sometimes it's worth just allowing some things that are minor to happen instead of getting into the ring of conflict. You've got to ask yourself, is this truly worth the fight? Is this truly worth what the potential of division in my family, in my workplace, in my church? Is this truly worth it? Or can I just make the sacrifice today? We've got to ask the question, is this worth the fight? Is this my fight? Is this worth the fight? Now flip over to John chapter 21. The third question we've got to ask ourselves, is this the right time? Is this the right time to step into the ring? Look at this, John chapter 21, verses 15 to 17. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said. You know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt that Jesus asked him the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Friends, I want you to know this is a moment that Jesus has actually chosen to bring Peter into the ring of conflict. This is a moment where Jesus and Peter are in the ring. They're in the ring. Jesus has initiated. Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, and Peter needs to be confronted by Jesus. Peter, do you love me? I want you to think about this. Somebody that you truly love, your spouse, your child. They ask you a question, do you love me? If Ainsley said to me, hey, Jeff, do you really love me? That would pierce my heart. Do you not know? Do you not know how much I love you? Of course I love you. That's what Peter's feeling. Jesus is confronting him. He's in the moment of conflict. You denied me, Peter. Now I need to know something. Do you love me? Jesus, you know I love me. Then feed my sheep. Second time, Peter, do you love me? Oh, come on, Jesus, you know. You know I love you. Then feed my sheep. And then when he asks the third time, Peter knows that this is about the denial. He's in the ring, and Jesus is confronting him on the fact that he has denied Jesus. What I want to point out is this, though. This isn't the first time that Jesus has seen Peter after the cross, after the resurrection. This isn't the first moment that they've been together. You see, in John chapter 20, verses 19 to 23, you don't need to turn there, but if you want to write that down, John 20, 19 to 23, Jesus appears to the disciples. Peter's in the room. This is an opportune time for Jesus to confront Peter about what he's done. The fact that he's denied him, that he didn't deny him once, he didn't deny him twice, but he denied him 3 times, that he cursed and swore that he didn't know Jesus. This is a great time. He just did it. It's fresh in his mind. Why doesn't Jesus confront him there? Why doesn't he pull him into the ring right there? And the answer is this: because he knew it wasn't the right timing. Because this moment in Peter's life, he was devastated. He was emotionally unhealthy. He had lost his Savior. The person who he had given his life to, the person that he had given everything for, had gone to the cross. And Peter is probably at the lowest place in his life. He's probably at the bottom of the barrel. He feels it. He feels lost. He feels hopelessness. He doesn't know what the future is going to hold. And for Jesus to confront him in that, no, he knows that's not the right timing. What Peter needs right there is life. What he needs right there is someone to breathe hope into him. He stands before him. Peter, look, I'm alive. There's a future. There's something good ahead. You just need to grab hold of life. Get out of that pit, Peter. Get out of that difficult situation, Peter. You need to know that I'm alive and something good's going to come forward. He doesn't take this moment to confront him. He waits a little while. It's the wisdom of Jesus. He knows that there's a time to confront and there's a time not to confront. You see, friends, sometimes as soon as someone says something, we want to confront them. Oh, that person said something to me, so I'm going to go talk to them right now. Get into this ring right now. Get in here. You said this. You didn't look at me. You looked at me in the wrong way. You told somebody this. I want to talk to you right now. And the gloves come off and we begin to duke it out. And that person may enter the ring in an unhealthy place, and your confrontation is not going to do anything. Please listen. When you confront somebody who's in an unhealthy place, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to get somebody who's already down on the mat. You're going to have they may need to be talked to at some point, but you need to ask yourself, is this the right timing? Does this person need me to speak life into them right now, or can I confront? What's the timing of the ring? And in that moment, Peter is on the mat. He's on the mat. And Jesus knows, he knows that he needs to wait for a few days before he confronts them. My very first youth convention, there was a moment in the middle of this convention where one of our volunteer staff made a decision. It was a decision that was, in my mind, was the wrong decision. And it did have a significant impact. It was my fight. And Ainsley and I had seen the decision made, we had heard about it, and we made a comment. And so nothing said at that moment. On Sunday, that happened on Saturday, on Sunday at lunchtime. Now, friends, I've told you before the amount of energy and effort that went into these conventions. I had no sleep. I was going to bed at 4:30 each morning and getting up at 6 o'clock, like an hour and a half to 2 hours sleep. I'm so tired, and we're on our last day, and I've been working so hard. And I walk into into the Queen's University cafeteria area that was set up for our volunteers. This is the one break I have until probably 9 or 10 o'clock that night. The one break where I can just sit for a moment, have a meal. And as my wife and I walk into the room, this volunteer with his entire staff, his support team, say to Ainsley and I, hey, can we talk to you for a second? So there's this table of about 12 of them. And we're like, okay. They said, we want to talk to you about what was said yesterday. Seriously, this is happening now? He said, yeah, we want to talk to you about what you said yesterday. And they begin to throw some verbal punches. They begin to confront us. They disagreed with what was said. They supported their decision. They began to give it to us. Ainsley was in tears, and I was holding them back. I'm trying to be a strong leader, but we were incredibly crushed. We were getting beaten up. Friends, I didn't walk into that ring. I crawled into that ring. I was not emotionally healthy at that moment. I was drained. They had taken a time where there was 12 other people around them to confront me. Not really the best timing. They took a moment that was my only breather for the day to confront us. Not really the smartest thing. And they took a moment when I was so exhausted that all I needed was just enough energy, just the reserves, just the fumes of the tank to get me through the next session. And they took a lot of those fumes in that moment. It wasn't that I was afraid of having the conversation. It was just the wrong timing. You see, friends, when it comes to conflict, we've got to ask ourselves, is this person emotionally healthy enough right now? Is this person okay to be brought into the ring? Will my confrontation of this issue hurt them further, or will I need to wait a little bit longer before I confront them? Will I need to act like Jesus, who gave a moment for Peter to get healthy before he confronted? You see, Jesus didn't avoid the confrontation. He didn't avoid the conflict, but he waited for the right timing. And we've got to ask ourselves, is this the right timing? So your spouse gets home from work, and they've done something wrong. They've just had this busy day. Do you jump on them right away? What kind of response do you think they're going to get? Your spouse comes home and there's something that upsets you about them. You bring them into the ring. They come in exhausted. Or you're in the middle of a stressful moment. You're in a season where the stress is significant and somebody comes up to you and they confront you on something. Do you think that's going to help? Or everybody's tired. You know those family moments when everybody's exhausted? When everybody has had no sleep, and there's something that somebody said, and you have lost your patience, and you just... They're so tired. Everybody's tired. You know that you're going to have a royal rumble in the ring. You know that. Because nobody's awake enough. Nobody's healthy enough. Oh, it seems so practical, but friends, how many times do we just jump to conflict right away? We've got to ask ourselves, is this the right conflict? Or is this the right timing for this fight? So is this my fight? Is this worth fighting for? Is this the right timing? And here's the last question. How will I fight? You see, there will always be a moment when you know that you have to enter the ring. There will always be a moment, friends, that you will have to enter the ring. I guarantee you this. In our lives, we will always face conflict, and there will be moments where you have to get into the ring. You don't let a child get away with things because you care about them. You don't let a coworker steal because you care about the company. You have to confront. There's a moment where you got to get into the ring. By the way, none of our coworkers are stealing. There's a moment you got to get into the ring, but when you get in the ring, you got to ask the question, how will I fight? How will I fight? John chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. We're not going to read it, but it's the story of the adulterous woman. She's brought into the circle where Jesus is. And there are a bunch of men around her, and they are people who love the fight. They are people who want to proclaim truth. They've drawn her into the ring, and they've brought Jesus into the ring, and they're standing there in the ring, and they're going to fight with truth. They got all kinds of rocks. We're going to throw this rock of truth, you adulterous woman. You were with this man, this rock. You were with this man, this rock. Oh, and then there's somebody who is the proclaimer of truth. They got the big rock. They got the biggest truth of all. They're ready to let her have it. And she's in the ring. And they are people who proclaim truth. Let us tell you what should happen to this woman. She is condemned to the death penalty. Let's throw the rocks of truth at her. And as they're in the ring, Jesus finds himself there, and they say, hey, Jesus, what do you think? And Jesus says to them, hey, listen, okay, you want to throw rocks of truth? Then let me ask you this. Whoever doesn't have a sin in your life, who's never done anything wrong, you throw the first rock. Okay, like the person who's perfect out there, throw the first rock. You go ahead, do it. One by one, you hear that sound because people know that there's dirt in all our lives, things that nobody sees. And one by one, they drop the rocks and walk away. And Jesus comes to this moment where this lady is there, and he looks at her and he says, hey, ma'am, like, where are the people who are throwing the rocks of truth? Where are your accusers? And she says to him, there's nobody here like that. And he says that I'm not going to accuse you either. He actually says, I'm not going to condemn you either. This word, I'm not giving a judgment call that will cause you to be punished. He says, go and sin no more. It is the perfect combination of grace and truth. And when you step into the ring, you have got to be willing to fight with grace and truth together. They have to be together. Jesus doesn't say, hey, just go on, nobody's going to throw rocks at you. He says, don't sin anymore. Look, you did something wrong. You can't sleep with men who aren't your husband. Stop it. It's truth. But lady, go ahead. I'm not condemning you anymore. I'm going to show you grace. But he doesn't just say, hey, just go ahead. Everything's fine. No, grace and truth at the same time. And when we find ourselves in the ring, when we find ourselves in the ring of conflict. It's okay to speak truth, but you better be willing to show grace at the same time. And it's okay to be Canadian and to be loving and gracious, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to speak truth. We need grace and truth. That's the left and right hook of the conflict. Grace, truth, both at the same time. Had this pastor this one time who made a comment, and he told his congregation that I had this ill perception of them. Not really sure why he said this, but word got back to me through board members. Board members called me. I'm not even in a church. I'm just in a district office. I get this phone call from a board member who says, hey, Jeff, board member of this church, did you blah, 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 blah? No. Well, this is what was communicated in the annual business meeting. Well, I was angry. I was fuming. I'm walking around our office. I'm angry. And so I went to my supervisor, and I told him what I was feeling. He says, well, why don't you confront him? You mean you want me to get into the ring with this guy? Like, I don't want to mess up anything for the district office, cause conflicts that don't belong. He says, no, you should confront this. So I did. I called him. I said, hey, Pastor so-and-so. I said, I want to talk to you. I had a board member call me about something that you said in an annual business meeting. Immediately, this person snaps at me. I want to know right now who it was that called you. Well, I'm not telling you. Yeah, I want to know. I'm not telling you. The person called me with no idea that I would call you, so I'm not telling you. So you can put that demand away. I'm not. But this is what was communicated to me. Did you say that? Well, all of a sudden, this pastor starts to backtrack, trying to give explanation, trying to get around this. And I just said this. I said, look, here is the truth. This is the truth. This is the facts. This is what my true perspective. What you said was inaccurate. I said, I'm not asking for you to make a public declaration. I'm not asking for you to do anything. But I would appreciate from this point forward that you would only communicate the truth, because this isn't truth. That's all I have to say. Okay? And the conversation ended. I didn't push. I didn't tell him he was a liar, a deceiver, or a bad pastor, although I thought those things. I spoke truth, and I did it graciously. What's so interesting is that the next time I saw this pastor, he was so friendly with me, so loving to me, so kind to me. We've had a good relationship since, because when I brought him into the ring, because I had to, it was my fight. When I brought him into the ring, I didn't just hit him with truth, but I hit him with grace. I hit him with grace. You see, friends, when you get to the moment where you know you have to confront somebody, you better be fighting with grace and truth at the same time. Because your truth sometimes is going to leave people devastated and will sever a relationship. The question you've got to ask yourself is, do I want this relationship to continue in the future? Do I want to continue my relationship with this person in the future? Because if you do, then you won't just hit hard with truth. You'll ensure that grace is there. Let me just say this last thing. You need to fight in the ring of conflict the same way you want to be fought. And if you're going to be hitting people with truth, then you better hit them with grace too, because when they come after you, if all you've hit with is truth, then that's all they're going to hit you with. There have been moments where I've had to say to people, look, I am absolutely wrong, and I am sorry. But you did this. I know. And they keep hitting me with truth. And there's been a few people I've said to them, I said, look, I cannot fix the past. I wish I could. I wish I could have done that all over again, and you have every right to be angry with me. I messed up. But my question is, do you want to be in a relationship with me in the future? Because if you do, I need you to show me grace right now. I need you to show me grace. Church, there are going to be many moments in our future where we're going to have to get into the ring. I don't mean me and all you. That would just be awkward. I mean you and somebody else are going to get into the ring. And it's okay to confront people on things. But please do it with grace. Please speak life to people. There are enough hits that come our way in life that we need people to lift us up. And when you throw the punch of truth, make sure that it's followed through with the punch of grace. How will I fight? None of us want to be in the ring. None of us want to be in conflict. But when we find ourselves here, we've got to ask these questions. Is this my fight, or is this somebody else's? Is this a fight that's worth fighting for? Is this something that, if I address, is it something that I need to address? Or is this a passing moment? Is this the right timing? How's that person doing? Am I paying attention to their health? And lastly, if you have to step into the ring of conflict, what gloves will you put on? How will you fight? Grace and truth at the same time. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Jess, would you just come back to the piano? I know it's such a practical message. It's not the stuff that we swing from the chandeliers on. But I've been here for 3.5 years. And there's been the odd conflicts I've had with people in the congregation, but more so I've watched conflicts between individuals. And there are times I walk away and I think, man, why are they fighting about that? Why is that person getting in the ring? It's not their fight. Why is that person confronting that person right now? They're not healthy. And then there are times I'm watching and going, oh, this person's giving some good punches of truth. I just wish that they would give some good punches of grace. There's other moments I think, man, that person's showing so much grace, but would they please just throw one punch of truth because that person needs to hear it? How will you fight? I want you, with your heads bowed, your eyes closed, I want you just to search your heart. I don't know if you're in a conflict with somebody right now. Maybe it's here in church, maybe it's in your home, maybe it's in your workplace. But I've had this ring built because I want you to have this picture about whether or not you should be in the ring. And if you get into the ring, is this the right fight? Is it a fight that's worth fighting for? Is it the right timing to be in the ring? And how will you fight if you get in there? I want you to have that picture in your mind. I want you to ask those questions about this conflict in your life. And listen to the Holy Spirit and see what He says. And while you're doing that, I want to ask a question for those of you who may not know Jesus. The greatest conflict that ever took place was humanity against God. Where the very moment that we did our first action, first sin, that very first missed mark, we found ourselves in a broken relationship with God, in conflict with the creator of the entire universe. And it seemed like that would be what all of eternity would be like, this conflict between us and God. We could never fix it, no matter how well we tried to live. But if you're in this place and you don't know Jesus, I want to tell you something. Jesus fixed the conflict when He went to the cross on your behalf. He died on the cross and He made it possible for you to step out of the ring, grab hold of the Father's hand, and walk with Him. He loves you that much. If you've never given your life to Jesus, I'm going to ask that, and you want to this morning, and say, I want to be in relationship with this God. Would you just raise your hand? Nobody's looking, just you and me. I've never done this before, but I want to give my life to Jesus. I want to walk in a relationship with the living God. Just really quickly, wave at me. Anybody in this place? Wait for one more second. Is there anybody in this place? All right. If maybe you didn't have the courage to raise your hand right now, maybe you need to wait for a week and really wrestle with what it means and ask a few people. But if you just need a little bit more explanation, there are going to be some prayer people here at the front. They'll pray for your needs, or they'll walk with you through the next steps, and I'd encourage you to come forward. But church, as we close this service, I want to be a church that knows how to fight, that we will only step into the ring when it's our fight. I want to be a church that knows what things we need to be passionate about, worked up about. I want to be a church that really considers what people are going through when we check the timing. And I want to be a church that speaks truth, but speaks grace at the same time. I want to be like Jesus. And I can see the tears on in that woman's eyes as she saw a man who confronted her with truth, but did it with incredible grace. And I pray that that's what you would live. That if you have to get into the ring, that you would get into it with grace and truth. Let's pray. Jesus, this morning as we conclude this service, I pray that you would help us. Conflict is not easy, and there are all kinds of experts who will teach us about what we should do. But I pray this morning when we think about the conflicts that we can be in, that we would ask ourselves, is this our fight? Is this a fight worth fighting? Is the timing right? And how am I going to fight? Let us be like you, Jesus. Let us take our cues from you. You didn't avoid conflict, but you knew when to get into the ring, and you knew how to act when you were in there. And I pray that we would be just like you. Jesus, thank you for a great congregation. Help them as they engage in our community and they live as people of peace. Bless them now, I pray. Meet whatever needs they have. Let them have a great week, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.